He's right. I mean, what? I never thought of myself like as this crazy, raging progressive. I am a Christian, but now I feel like, I guess in the Republicans' terms, maybe I'm a progressive because I think we should be doing as much as possible to help people. People are finally listening to Bernie, says Rosemary. This is why we love Bernie, they say. So look, I have never thought of myself I'm not a progressive at all. But I think that the times they are changing, when you start to take away services from people, when you start to treat people as if they are not human beings, people start to realize, like, wait a minute, it's not just a slogan or a cliche when they say the cruelty is the point. The cruelty really is the point. When you deport people like you do, these massive deportations.
But I want to show everybody just how far off base Jimmy Dore is with his analysis when you see a cogent and honest analysis of it come from Don Lemon, of all people, where he's like, hey, this actually does seem to be working. I think the Democrats should get on board with this. Maybe I too am a progressive, right? And as Gavin mentioned in the beginning of the show, yeah, it's easy to be like, where were you in 2020? Where were you in 2016? But beggars can't be choosers. You never look your gift horse in the mouth. And I'm ready to embrace Don Lemon, the Bernie bro, if he is true and sincere. What say you, Gavin?
Lemon. Yeah, it's interesting with this one. I'm genuinely interested if this is authentic or if he's now realized, oh shit, I ain't on cable news anymore. I'm right in the thick of independent media on YouTube, right next to Silly and Billy. Maybe it's time to not be a bland, boring, centrist, neoliberal Democrat. Maybe that's not what these people are craving. So it could be a mix of the both. But ultimately, I agree, right? Like, for whatever reason, he's making this transition. If it, in fact, turns into a serious transition to the left or to the progressive left, then, yeah, I'll take it.
100%. Let's listen to what the man has to say.
Not a poor country, but you are treated like we are. Now, didn't I just say this the other day? I didn't know Bernie Sanders was going to say that. I said we live in the richest country in the world with the most resources. When did it become bad to help people and to look out for our fellow men and our neighbors and our people even who don't live in America? Why is shutting down USAID a bad thing when it helps so many people around the world? Isn't that Christian values? Isn't that just doing unto others? Bernie Sanders.
There is no excuse in God's earth that people have to make a choice between food and the medicine they need to stay alive.
He's right. I mean, what? I never thought of myself like as this crazy, raging progressive. I am a Christian, but now I feel like, I guess in the Republicans' terms, maybe I'm a progressive because I think we should be doing as much as possible to help people. People are finally listening to Bernie, says Rosemary. This is why we love Bernie, they say. So look, I have never thought of myself I'm not a progressive at all. But I think that the times they are changing, when you start to take away services from people, when you start to treat people as if they are not human beings, people start to realize, like, wait a minute, it's not just a slogan or a cliche when they say the cruelty is the point. The cruelty really is the point. When you deport people like you do, these massive deportations, and not that you're deporting people because, Barack Obama deported people. If you come into the country illegally, you have to suffer the consequences. Many times you have to be deported, right? But to do it and then put out these videos and people in shackles and chains and to like, yeah, it makes you wonder, like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Maybe I'm good.
And I wanted to pause it right there to talk about a couple of things. Obviously, his analysis of the situation when it comes to immigration is slightly different from mine, but I think it's a interesting conversation to have that now that Don Lemon is not steeping in the swamp, right? You could see when he was addressing it, he was like, I'm not a progressive. I've never in my life even thought about being progressive. But it seems like this guy, Bernie Sanders and AOC, they're the only ones that are even talking anything that's remotely sensible at this time. They're the only ones saying anything that's meeting the moment at all. So even this guy who is in $1 million home in New York City, I mean, just look at this guy's background. That is not a fake green screen background. That is Don Lemon's home. He is a very affluent man. And he's looking around and he's like, you know what, dude? Like, yeah, we can't let people run the country like this. We can't let these mass deportations happen. I was reading this morning, Gavin, about a woman who immigrated here from the Philippines 50 years ago when she was 14 years old. She's lived here legally with the green card for 50 years old. Her name was Llewellyn, and she got swept up by ICE. Her family can no longer reach her. She just got plucked off the street because apparently she was involved in some anti-Trump activism, and she wasn't officially a United States citizen. She was a permanent resident with a permanent green card, and they just picked her up and tossed her back to the Philippines. Okay. Somewhere she hadn't lived in 50 fucking years. Okay. If you haven't been somewhere in 50 years, that means you don't know anyone when you get there. It's absolutely absurd. And so it wakes up people who are comfortable, sometimes crunchy liberals like Don Lemon, to be like, oh yeah, we have to do something. And I'm not opposed to that guy. That guy sounds like he's preaching the Bible, right? That guy thinks like do unto others. That's basic stuff. And I think that's how these new ideas that are not so new to us are going to permeate the mainstream. It's going to be just common sense to be in the position of a progressive.
I also think there's an element here of just straight up accelerationism, honestly, where Trump is so bad that it is moving even normie people like Don Lemon to the left in reaction. And I think that's because a lot of people that were just normies, Zach, they really underestimated Trump 2.0. They did kind of buy into this, oh, like, don't be hysterical. He's still going to just be a normal president. You might not like the guy, but calm down. He's not going to be a literal fascist. He's not going to be a literal Hitlerian dictator or whatever. And I could see Don Lemon buying into that, oh, calm down, whatever. But now the fascist is literally not only at the door, but it's broken down the door. We have a fucking wolf inside. And now I think people are like, oh shit, yep. The Bernie people were right. They've been vindicated. We did need something this extreme to combat the extremeness of Donald Trump. And again, we don't think of Bernie as being extreme, but I think a lot of people did, right? They viewed him as a socialist, someone who was going to bring serious change. And that's always kind of scary to people that are just doing fine enough, right? People like Don Lemon, obviously, who, even under Obama, I'm sure was doing perfectly fine. He didn't feel like there was a need for a political revolution. He's like, what do you mean? Like, come on, we're doing pretty good.
12 million over 3 years from CNN.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's a lot of money.
But even if you weren't getting paid from a company like CNN, I do think there are a lot of middle-class Americans who are like, you know what, Obama, pretty good. Like, we don't need a political revolution. Like, let's not get crazy. Like, that seems a little bit extreme. I have a job. I'm doing fine. The things are doing okay. But again, what we knew was that if Trump actually did get into power, things would get so much worse, so much more quickly. And now everyone's like, oh yeah, they were right. And I do think that, again, that kind of almost in an accelerationist way is leading people to embrace an ideology or a kind of candidate, a Bernie and AOC, that they wouldn't have even 4 years ago, because they just had to be woken up. They just had to be like, oh, no, this is what we need. This is the only way to counter this insane MAGA movement.
Oh, yeah, it was a hard lesson that could only be learned after watching Kamala Harris fail miserably to prevent the second term of Donald Trump. And, a lot of people poo-pooed us. A lot of people said, oh, you don't care about dying babies. Oh, you guys don't care about, all of the horrible things that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to do. And it's like, of course I care about that, dog. But we have one or two outcomes that are going to happen. And I don't want to see the Constitution shredded before my very eyes. And to Gavin's point, we knew it was going to be way worse the second time around. Donald Trump, when he was in his first term, it was unthinkable to him that he wasn't going to win. That's the kind of mentality that he had. So he thought he had 8 years, okay, and he ended up just pissing away a large portion of his first term because he couldn't get Obamacare repealed and replaced. He had his entire beef with John McCain. And then they finally did the tax cuts. And by the time anything else had rolled around, it was COVID and it was time to campaign again. And he really didn't have he didn't have the ambition that he was going to have the second time around. He didn't have the rubber hitting the road.
He also wasn't quite as far into dementia at that point. So ideas like taking over Canada probably didn't seem as reasonable to him.
Exactly. And now he is totally brazen. And he thinks he's invincible, and he's learned that nobody is going to reel him in or prevent him from doing any obnoxious action, following whatever ridiculous impulse he has. He views himself as the king of America now. And we knew that was going to happen. We knew that it was like, oh my God, if we let this guy back in a second time, he's going to know how to really wreak havoc. And so now he has a guy like Elon Musk, the world's richest man, just taking a machete to all of the entitlement services of America, to getting rid of employees at national parks, at OSHA. He's trying to abolish the Department of Education, guys. I don't think it's an exaggeration to be like, this guy is a cannonball, could potentially be the end of America as we know it. So,
oh yeah, I mean, Steve Bannon was literally talking to Chris Cuomo the other day about how they're already trying to figure out a way for Trump to run for a third term.
Exactly, which is something we also warned about from this fucking Casa del Vanguard. Yeah. So I think all of that craziness, the fact that it has gotten as bad as it has, the fact that people are seeing institutions they thought were permanent crumble, it wakes up even a Don Lemon who's sitting in a multi-million-dollar penthouse in Midtown Manhattan with a gorgeous view and probably help around his house, to be like, damn it, dude, like, we've really got to look out for the poor or we're going to have no country left.
Yeah, let's hear the rest of this.
becoming a progressive. Maybe the country's becoming a progressive. Maybe the cruelty on the right, the MAGA people, are forcing me to become a progressive. Maybe I'm sort of the reverse of the Bill Maher. You know, Bill Maher says, I didn't change, the country changed, or the party changed. But maybe I haven't changed. It's just that the Republicans and the country, what's out in the zeitgeist, the people who are in control of our country, have become so cruel that they are pushing me and others to become more progressive, perhaps, to think about our values more. I don't know. I have to think about that. I'm not saying it is, but perhaps, maybe so. I'm going to have to reevaluate. Perhaps we grow the independent party. I don't know. We need a rally for human decency, says Camilla.
That's a huge step, though. We need to rally for an independent party, maybe. I don't know. These level of thoughts coming from a man who is so insulated and has for his entire career been conditioned to impulsively oppose anything that is too far to the left, anything that is too progressive, right? Because at the end of the day, we know Don Lemon, that dude is a climber. If you make it to an on-air personality that is known, you're hosting New Year's Eve on CNN or whatever, like that means you are a climber. That means you're diligent. That means you really care about your career. So everything that he has taught himself to do over the last 2 decades where he's been in media, he's now unlearning because he has to authentically grapple with the reality, and he's not doing it, you know, surrounded by a bunch of the most odious people on earth.
Yeah. And also I think that like obviously ratings matter on cable for sure, but he's still going to get the paycheck at the end of the year regardless. Now he's on YouTube, and you actually do have to preach a message that people want to hear. You can't literally just be a boring fucking talking head on cable news and, oh, I'm sure enough grandmas will just have the TV on that it'll get me the ratings I want, right? No, now you actually do have to preach a message that people want to hear. And I think Don Lemon is realizing the winds are blowing back in the Bernie direction. And if he wants to have any success or relevance in the next 3-4 years, yeah, he better be on the right fucking page.
Camilla Radina. I agree. And I think that's what this rally was for last night. I mean, this is crazy. Do we see a Buttigieg Cortez ticket?
That is a lot of diversity on a ticket for the American people.
I'm just saying. And then, is there a Bernie?
I think Bernie's too old.
But here's the thing. This is what people don't understand. When I say that people are old or they whatever, it's also your ideas. It's not just about age, which I tried to get people to understand when I was at the CNN. Like,
man, that was so sharp right there. It's a state of mind. When people say, oh, that guy's old, they're talking about antiquated. They're talking about out of touch. They're talking about how somebody who has, you know, descended into senescence, like Joe Biden or Donald Trump. When you look at a person who is just in the package of an older body, you actually see them as sophisticated. You see them as seasoned. You see them as somebody who's been around the block before, somebody who's trustworthy, right? That is what Bernie Sanders represents. He is the opposite of Joe Biden when it comes to how you would perceive an elderly person.
Yeah, and honestly, I think his elderliness is not necessarily a bad thing. I think people kind of like that about Bernie. You know, they kind of like the fact they're like, oh yeah, this guy doesn't have anything to lose at this point. He doesn't really have anything to sell out for anymore. He's so fucking old. He's been doing the same shit and saying the same things for so fucking long. So it's someone that everyone can trust. I actually think it's a good thing. Obviously, there would be a point if he got too old and started to slip into cognitive decline. Obviously, then it would go in the other direction, but that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, that's why the accusations from Jimmy that Bernie's somehow selling out don't land. It's because it's like, what the fuck is he sold out for? He hasn't sold out for anything. This man could be doing so much for profit, and he's chosen not to, okay? And he's still out doing rallies, and instead of, you know, sitting somewhere fancy and having martinis brought to him, he's rallying for the American people. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Sell out?
When you're saying when people are out of it or they're past something, it means that their ideas are stale, they're canned, they're past their expiration date. It's not just about age and whatever. It's about their ideas and where they are. That's how I feel about Chuck Schumer. Love him, respect him, but it's time to move on. It's time to pass the baton. But I don't think that Bernie is there yet.
He doesn't read as old as, yes, I
his policies don't read old at all. His policies read young, and the young people like him. And guess who else likes him? And then you can weigh in on this, please, Peter. The same group of people who voted for Donald Trump, those college bros and college-age people, they love Bernie. It's the same progressive. It's the same message, really, or similar, very similar.
It's almost surreal listening to Don Lemon say this, because he would have been fucking calling these people Bernie bros, women haters, like, you know what I mean? He would have talked about them like they were unserious, like these are not legitimate political actors, right? But the chickens have finally come home to roost. everybody that was on the side of the Bernie bro. I mean, Gavin was maybe the most Bernie bro coded person I've ever met in my entire life. Vice News, when we had no profile, zero profile, we were just kids in flyover country. Gavin shows up to a Bernie rally, has a Bernie shirt on. The Vice reporter snaps a picture of it. It shows up in Vice. It's been written in the stars that Gavin and I would go down in history as two of the most passionate Bernie bros. Gavin, an even slightly more passionate Bernie bro than me, the man with the iconography of the time. You know, he's immortalized in Vice magazine. Okay. To see the chickens come home to roost, where it's like, oh yeah, everything that we said back then, which is that Bernie has the overlap. Oh, the people who aren't motivated to show up and vote on election day will be motivated if Bernie Sanders is their first-time voters, Latino voters. That's another thing that we're not talking about, right? Donald Trump made huge grounds with Latino voters. He made huge grounds with Hispanic folks. Okay. And do you know why? It was because they had completely left the Democratic Party. They were like, oh, I'll vote for Donald Trump for X, Y, and Z. Okay. But they would have voted for Bernie Sanders for X, Y, and Z. So it's not just white jabronis. It's not just Brad, Thad, and Chad that would have supported Bernie Sanders. It's also first generation immigrants that would have supported Bernie Sanders. It's all kinds of people. It was a very diverse coalition.
Yep. And here's that photo of me from back in my 17th year. Wow, I was only 17. That's crazy. But yeah, that was in 2015, 2016 at a Kansas City Bernie rally. And yeah, I was so happy about that. I remember I was like, oh shit, they tweeted out the photo.
Bro, I remember when that happened. I was happy for you. I was like, holy shit, you look kind of stoned in this video, in this little clip here. I don't know. You probably were.
I even have a little cannabis pin on the shirt.
Anyway, like I said, we've been about this shit. That was almost 10 fucking years ago, Gavin. That was 9 years ago, over 9 years ago. That's how long we've been about this shit. Okay. So if anybody wants to be like, oh, why do you guys get so passionate about this? Why do you guys get so worked up about this? It's because we have been living and breathing this shit every single fucking day. We have ridden the entire roller coaster. Okay. I remember being in the Olathe North Chronicle newsroom late my senior year of high school, writing a fucking article about how Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump were signaling the two paths that America had forward for us. Okay. One side was going to be love. The other side was going to be hate and division. Okay. It was, are we going to invest in community or are we going to reject community? Unfortunately, we found out we were going to reject community, but I was writing passionate editorials about how Bernie Sanders was going to save us from the fucking fascist threat of Donald Trump. We have been doing this for so long. And I can only say that I'm happy that Don Lemon is starting to vocalize these positions that I've had for a long time. But I want everyone else to understand I get it. Sometimes it's frustrating when people who have so much get to the party so late. But we have to remember that the people that he's reaching are people who were not going to just instinctively become Bernie Sanders bros, people who are going to instinctively think about socialism. And so it's really important that you have a guy like Don Lemon with mainstream credentials going out there and starting to get people comfortable with the idea of supporting Bernie Sanders in a meaningful way.